laissez-faire banking? The dictionary meaning of laissez-faire is unwillingness to get involved in or influence other people's activities. Accordingly, laissez-faire banking would mean a free banking system or banking sans state intervention. As students of economics, we are already familiar about central banks and the important role played by them in stabilizing the monetary system by controlling the supply of money. It is taken for granted that banking is inherently unstable and the banking system needs a lender of last resort to defend it in a crisis, and the value of currency has to be protected by the government. However, slowly but surely, there has arisen a new interest in the area of laissez-faire banking. The argument raised is that if markets are better at allocating resources than governments are, then so should be the case with money and the banking industry. Kevin Daud, along with other economists such as David Glessner and George Selgin, have explored the theory of free banking and conclude that government intervention in the banking system is not only unnecessary but essentially counterproductive. Kevin Daud in particular has given a detailed suggestion as to how a banking system would evolve in the absence of state intervention and how this evolutionary process would lead to the development of a highly sophisticated free banking system with several distinctive features, each feature contributing to the stability of the monetary system, making the system a highly stable one. The various stages in the evolution of a free banking system, according to Kevin Daud, are as follows. Stage 1. The development of coins. Daud begins from a primitive society when individuals begin to trade with one another. The problems faced in the barter exchange system forced people to converge on precious metals as desirable intermediate goods. However, then arose the problem of weighing lumps of metal and assessing their purity. As a solution, some individuals would start acting as intermediaries and make a living out of assessing the purity of the metal brought to them and recasting it into pieces of a convenient size. Thus, metal price would gradually become standardized and more people would be attracted to this business, leading to distinctive mints and privately issued coins. Each of these private mints would exist primarily to earn profit, but there would be no incentive to cheat by overstating the weight of the coins, because such a deception would be easy to detect, would harm the mint's reputation and business, and would be a legal offense. As a sideline, Daud argues that it is at this stage historically that governments have intervened in the monetary system and created a legal monopoly in the minting business, imposed high minting charges, and misrepresented the weight of the coins it issued. If this does not happen, the next stages in the evolution of free banking would be as follows. Stage 2. The development of banks issuing convertible notes. Once privately issued coins come into being to solve the problem of barter, the next problem would be of storing these coins. People would be prepared to pay others who already had the facilities, say safety walls and strong boxes, to keep gold safe, to store their gold coins for them. Hence, goldsmiths would be asked to look after other people's gold coins in return for a fee. The depositors would also obtain receipts from the goldsmiths Now, when two people agreed on an exchange, one would go and withdraw his coins from the goldsmith and hand them over to the other, who would deposit them again with his own goldsmith. But it would be found that a more convenient way of the exchange would be that the party accepting payment simply accepted the goldsmith's receipts and saved both parties the bother of visiting their respective goldsmiths. Hence, goldsmiths' receipts would begin to circulate as a medium of exchange in their own right. Also, the goldsmiths would begin to notice that only a small proportion of their deposits of gold would be demanded in redemption over any given period. They would realize that they could safely lend out some of the gold deposited with them and face little danger of being unable to meet their liabilities. This lending activity would also give them an opportunity to earn additional profit. Goldsmiths would thus become bankers, accepting deposits and lending money. They would now compete with each other for deposits and do so by offering interest on deposits. They will also give depositors a guarantee that their notes would be converted back into gold and silver coins as and when desired by the depositor. These guarantees would have the status of legally binding contracts. According to Daud, this commitment to convertibility is one of the most important features of a free banking system. It would not only help ensure that the bank notes remain relatively stable in value, but would also provide an effective discipline against goldsmith bankers who issued an excess of notes. This is because the circulation of convertible notes would be limited by the demand to hold them. Any notes issued in excess of demand would be returned to the bank for redemption, so a bank would not deliberately choose to issue an excess of notes. In this way, Daud establishes that even if the government or central bank is not given the monopoly right of note issue, there would be no overissue of currency notes. Stage 3. The development of note clearing. The next stage in the evolution of banking system would be the development of a note clearing system that would arise out of the bankers' attempts to raise their profits by increasing the demand of their notes. In the beginning, no banker would accept the notes of other banks, but then they would realize that any two goldsmith bankers could make themselves jointly better off by agreeing to accept each other's notes. This is because the public would more readily accept the notes of either of the two banks, given the knowledge that the other bank would accept these notes as well. Additional bank pairs would be formed, and it would become increasingly apparent that the easiest way to organize the note exchange system would be to meet regularly at a central clearing session where the banks would hand back each other's notes and settle the differences. A central clearing system would thus evolve out of the bank's own private self-interest. The clearing system would be a further restraint on the ability of any bank to overissue its notes. This is because a bank issuing more notes than public demand would face reserve losses not only from the public directly but also at the central clearing sessions where other banks would return the extra notes to the issuing bank. Stage 4. The development of a liquidity market. Although the note convertibility and the central clearing system would stabilize the monetary system to a great extent, any bank can still face a problem of liquidity given its ability to redeem only a fraction of its liabilities at any given time. Daud is of the opinion that to deal with the problem, there will be the growth of a market in short-term liquidity. At any given time, some banks would find themselves with more liquidity than needed, while others would have less liquidity than demanded. Those with excess reserves would be willing to lend them out on a short basis, while those that were short of reserves would be willing to borrow them, making both groups better off. Experience would teach the lending banks what kind of collateral policy to be adopted, what practices to be followed, etc. Stage 5. The development of option clauses. Even with the development of a liquidity market, there might arise problems if there is an unexpectedly high demand for cash and the short-term liquidity market dries up as a result. This problem can be avoided, according to Daud, if instead of guaranteeing to redeem their notes for gold coins on demand, the banks could reserve the right to defer redemption for some pre-specified period. The note holders, of course, should have some pre-specified compensation from the banks when the notes were finally redeemed. In other words, the bankers could insert option clauses into the convertibility contract so that the public is assured that its notes were still safe. However, the option should be used only in exceptional circumstances, and for this, the banks should set the compensation to be paid to note holders at a high level. In this way, Daud has visualized the evolution of a laissez-faire banking system. According to him, institutions like note convertibility, clearing system, a market for short-term liquidity, and option clauses would develop and protect the banking system against shocks. This type of a free market monetary system would be highly stable. To further strengthen his point that a free banking system would be stable, Daud argues that with no state intervention, banks would understand that their long-term survival depended on their ability to retain their depositors' confidence. They would thus pursue conservative lending policies and maintain adequate capital. Daud does not agree with the argument that competition produces instability because good banks are forced to go along with the policy of bad banks. If bad banks expand rapidly, they can make easy short-term profits, which pressurizes good banks to follow suit, with the result that the banking system becomes unstable. Daud argues that rational banks would never follow this course of action. Instead, they would build up their financial strength and win over their customers' confidence. In the process, they might have to forego short-term profits, but they will win out in the long run. Daud also points out towards the negative impact of state intervention in the free banking system. State intervention in banking is normally taken to mean the establishment of a central bank to serve as lender of last resort and the establishment of a state-sponsored system of deposit insurance. Daud is of the opinion that lender of last resort only protects bad banks and try to keep weak banks opened, since good banks can always obtain loans to maintain their liquidity. The existence of lender of last resort reduces the incentives for good banks to maintain themselves and lures them to take greater risks in anticipation of lender of last resort protecting them from any crisis. Thus, ironically, lender of last resort produces the very instability that proponents of central bank often claim would arise under free banking. The same is the effect of a system of deposit insurance. Deposit insurance encourages undue risk taking by banks and reduces their financial health. Thus, Daud builds up his arguments against the view that banking by itself is unstable and requires state intervention in the form of a central bank or a state-sponsored deposit insurance. There are some counter arguments to it also. Kevin Daud's views have been challenged by Benston and Kaufman on the one hand and Sheila Dow on the other. Benston and Kaufman argue for a limited but positive role for government intervention. They do not fully disagree with Daud regarding his views on laissez-faire banking. This is apparent when they cite the case of United States, where bank failure rate increased after the establishment of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, which actually was set up to reduce crisis in banking. But instead of building up a case in favor of free banking, they focus on how banks should be regulated in the existing non-laissez-faire structure of banking. According to them, this regulation should be mostly in the form of capital adequacy requirements. They also favor a private central bank as opposed to government-owned central banks. Sheila Dow, however, argues for extensive regulation because, according to her, free banking is essentially unworkable in practice as it produces excessive cycling, giving rise to the need for a central bank to stand above the market processes and to take corrective actions. Also, she argues whenever there is a crisis in free banking, there is a scramble for safe assets. The issuer of the safe asset then becomes a de facto central bank. The special characteristics of money make the monetary system a public good, and the uncertainty associated with it means that financial laissez-faire, even if implemented, would ultimately give way to its own form of central banking. Thus, she says, what is needed is not deregulation but better regulation. As conclusion, we can say that although a strong case for laissez-faire banking has been built up, there are counter arguments too. What needs to be seen is how far such a free banking system can work in a country such as ours, where there is a need to put social objectives on a higher pedestal than the mere profit-making business of banks, till a time when our country reaches a stage of development at par with countries like US. The banking sector has far greater role to play in economic upliftment than merely earn profits for its shareholders. Till the time that even the basic needs of the entire population are not met, complete laissez-faire in banking will do more harm than good in developing countries. Thank you.